Hello, I'm Claire, and I'm really glad you're here. I hope wherever you're listening from, you're comfortable. Maybe you're walking home after work. Maybe you're drinking your morning coffee. Or maybe you're lying in bed, telling yourself you'll sleep in 5 minutes. Even though we both know that's probably not true. Today, I'd like to tell you a story. Not because it's extraordinary. Actually, because it's incredibly ordinary. And maybe that's exactly why it stayed with me. Last Tuesday, I was about to send a message to an old friend. Nothing serious. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple message. Hey, it's been a while. How have you been? I looked at it for a few seconds. Then I deleted it. I wrote it again. This time I changed hey to hi. For some reason, hi sounded friendlier. Then I wondered if it sounded too formal. So I changed it back. Then I added a smiley face. I stared at it, deleted the smiley, added it again, deleted it again. Then another thought appeared. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they'll think it's strange that I'm texting after so many months. Maybe I'm interrupting them. Maybe I should wait until the weekend. 20 minutes passed. Do you know how many messages I sent? None. The funny part is, my friend probably wasn't thinking about any of this. Only I was. Later that evening, I caught myself laughing. Not because the situation was funny, but because I suddenly realized something. I wasn't solving a problem anymore. I was creating one. Inside my own head. Have you ever done that? Maybe not with a text message. Maybe with an email. You read it again and again and one more time, changing one word, then another, until you can't even remember what you were worried about in the first place. Or maybe you've replayed a conversation in your mind. Someone says something very ordinary. Then 3 hours later, you're still thinking, wait, what did they actually mean? Or perhaps you've spent an entire evening worrying about something, only to wake up the next morning and realize it wasn't such a big deal after all. I think overthinking is one of the strangest things we do, because it often starts with something very small. A message, a look, a decision, a tiny mistake, and somehow our minds quietly turn it into something much bigger. Almost like adding pages to a story that hasn't even happened yet. When I was younger, I believed overthinking happened because I cared too much. And maybe that's partly true. If something matters to us, of course we'll think about it. But over the years, I've started wondering if there's another reason. We overthink because we want certainty. We want to know exactly what will happen, exactly how people feel, exactly what the future looks like. And when we don't know, our imagination steps in. Sometimes it's much kinder than reality, but very often it's much harsher. I remember applying for my very first job. After the interview, I walked home replaying every minute. Why did I answer that question like that? I should have smiled more. Maybe I talked too fast. Maybe they noticed I was nervous. For 3 days, I convinced myself I wasn't getting the job. Then the company called. They offered me the position. Do you know something? Everything I had worried about only existed in my imagination, not in theirs. That experience taught me something. Our minds are wonderful at creating stories, but they're not always good at telling the truth. And I think that's where overthinking begins. Not with facts, but with stories. Stories we write ourselves without ever checking if they're true. There's someone I've wanted to ask about this for a long time, because whenever something unexpected happens, he reacts very differently from me. If I spend 20 minutes thinking about a message, he probably spends 20 seconds. So, let's see what he has to say. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, Claire. First of all, I have to say, I can't believe you spent 20 minutes thinking about one text message.
Only 20? That's actually one of my better days.
Seriously though, I think that's one of the reasons our conversations are always interesting. Because we see the world differently. If I'm not sure about a message, I usually just send it. If it turns out I made a mistake, I'll deal with it later.
See. That sounds impossible to me.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Before I send an important message, I read it once, then again. Then I imagine how the other person might read it. Then I imagine how they might misunderstand it. Then I imagine how I would explain the misunderstanding. By that point, I'm tired, and I haven't even pressed send.
Can I ask you something? When you're thinking about all those possibilities, how often are you actually right?
That's a very uncomfortable question. Honestly, not very often. Most of the time, the conversation goes completely normally. Nothing dramatic happens.
Exactly. That's what fascinates me. Our brains spend so much energy preparing for situations that never arrive.
You know, that reminds me of something. Last month, I was invited to a small dinner with people I didn't know very well. For almost 2 days, I kept thinking, what if I don't know what to say? What if everyone else already knows each other? What if I say something embarrassing? I built this huge movie inside my head. Then I arrived. And do you know what happened? Someone dropped a spoon on the floor. Someone else forgot the restaurant had changed locations. Another person admitted they were nervous because they didn't know anyone either. Within 10 minutes, everyone was laughing. None of the things I worried about happened. Not one.
That's interesting. Because I had almost the opposite experience once. I walked into a networking event. I hadn't planned anything. No introduction. No conversation topics. Nothing. For the first 5 minutes. It was awkward. Really awkward. I remember standing there holding a cup of coffee, pretending to read the schedule on the wall.
I've definitely done that before.
I think everyone has. But then someone walked over and said, "First time here?" I said, "Is it that obvious?" He laughed. We started talking. By the end of the evening, I'd met 6 or 7 really interesting people. If I'd spent the whole week preparing every possible conversation, I don't think the evening would have gone any differently.
So, can I ask you something? Do you think overthinking is always a bad thing?
Actually, no. I don't. I think overthinking comes from something good. It means you care. You want to make a good impression. You don't want to hurt people's feelings. Those aren't bad qualities. The problem is, sometimes caring quietly becomes worrying. And worrying becomes imagining. Then imagining starts pretending to be reality.
I like that. Imagining starts pretending to be reality. That's exactly what it feels like.
Can I tell you about something my grandfather used to say?
Of course.
Whenever I worried too much, he'd smile and ask, "Are you solving a problem or just visiting it?" When I was younger, I didn't understand. Now I do. Thinking is useful when it helps us make a decision. But if we're just walking around the same thought, again, and again, and again, we're not moving forward anymore. We're just visiting the same place.
I've never heard that before. I really like it. Are you solving a problem or just visiting it? I think I'll remember that for a long time. You know, while you were talking, I suddenly remembered something I read years ago. It said that our brains are incredibly good at protecting us. Sometimes, too good. They try to prepare us for every possible problem, every possible disappointment, every possible mistake. Maybe that's why overthinking feels so convincing. Our minds believe they're helping us, even when they're exhausting us. But there's one thing I've always wondered. If overthinking feels so natural, why do some people seem to let things go so easily? Is it something we're born with? Or is it something we can learn? That's the question I'd love to explore next. You know, there's something you said a moment ago that keeps replaying in my mind. Imagining starts pretending to be reality. I think that's exactly what overthinking feels like. It doesn't begin as a lie. It begins as a possibility. Then, little by little, that possibility starts feeling like a fact.
Exactly. And what's strange is, we rarely imagine the best possible outcome. Have you noticed that?
Now that you mention it, you're right. If my friend doesn't reply to a message, I don't think, oh, they're probably having a wonderful day. I think, maybe I said something wrong.
Or, maybe they're upset with me.
Or, maybe I shouldn't have sent that message at all.
It's funny. Our imagination is incredibly creative. But sometimes, it only uses that creativity to scare us.
That's true. And the strange thing is, if someone else came to me with exactly the same situation, I'd probably give them completely different advice. I'd say, don't worry so much. They're probably just busy. You're thinking too much. But when it's my own life, those words suddenly become much harder to believe.
I think that's because we're kinder to other people than we are to ourselves.
I never thought about it that way. Maybe you're right. If my best friend made a small mistake, I wouldn't judge them for it. I'd probably forget about it within 5 minutes. But if I make the same mistake, I can remember it for weeks, sometimes even years.
Can I tell you about something that happened to me?
Please.
A few years ago, I was giving a presentation at work. Everything was going well. Then suddenly, I couldn't remember one word. Just one simple word. My mind went completely blank. It probably lasted 3 seconds. Maybe 4. I found the word. Finished the presentation. Everyone clapped. The meeting ended. But do you know what I thought about all the way home? Not the 45 minutes that went well. Only those 3 seconds.
I know exactly what you mean. It's amazing how our minds can ignore 99 good moments and focus on the one uncomfortable one.
The next morning, one of my colleagues stopped me in the hallway. He said, "Great presentation yesterday." I smiled and thanked him. Then I asked, "Did you notice when I forgot that word?" He looked confused. He said, "What word?"
No, really?
Really. He hadn't even noticed. The moment I'd been thinking about all evening didn't exist in his memory at all. Only mine.
That's incredible. And I think we've all experienced something similar. Sometimes, we're carrying around memories that no one else is carrying. We're embarrassed by moments that everyone else has already forgotten.
Exactly. There's a quote I once heard that stayed with me. It said, "You'll worry less about what people think of you when you realize how rarely they do." When I first heard it, I laughed. But the more I thought about it, the more true it felt. Most people aren't spending their day analyzing us. They're busy thinking about their own lives, their own worries, their own unfinished conversations. Just like we are.
That's strangely comforting. Not because people don't care, but because it reminds me that everyone is carrying something invisible. Maybe the person sitting next to you on the train is overthinking a conversation they had yesterday. Maybe the cashier at the supermarket is worrying about a job interview tomorrow. Maybe your friend is wondering if they said the wrong thing at dinner last night. We never really know. So maybe the goal isn't to stop thinking completely, because thinking is part of being human. Maybe the goal is simply to notice when our thoughts stop helping us and start frightening us instead.
I like that. Because it's realistic. We're never going to become people who never worry. But perhaps we can become people who don't believe every story our minds create.
That might be one of the hardest things we'll ever learn. And maybe one of the most important. Before we finish today, there's one final question I'd like us to explore. If overthinking is part of being human, can it ever become something beautiful? Or is it always something we need to fight? Let's talk about that. You know, before we recorded today's episode, I thought we were going to spend 20 minutes talking about how to stop overthinking. But now, I'm not even sure that's the right question anymore.
Neither am I. Because the more we talk, the more I think overthinking isn't really the problem.
Really? What do you mean?
Well, think about all the stories we've shared today. The text message, the presentation, the dinner. None of those happened because someone wanted to suffer. They happened because someone cared. You cared about your friend. You cared about making a good impression. You cared about doing well. I don't think caring is something we should get rid of.
That's true. If we never worried about anything, we probably wouldn't care about much either. Maybe overthinking is the shadow of caring.
I like that. The shadow of caring. Sometimes shadows look much bigger than the thing creating them.
Can I tell you something I've never really admitted out loud?
Of course.
Sometimes, I think I overthink because I'm afraid of regret. I keep imagining every possible mistake because I hope that if I imagine enough of them, none of them will happen. It's almost like my brain believes worrying is a form of preparation.
I understand that. And honestly, I used to feel the same way. But one day I realized something. The moments I regretted most weren't usually the mistakes I made. They were the things I never did. The conversation I avoided. The opportunity one turned down. The message I never sent.
That's interesting, because today's episode actually started with a message I never sent.
Exactly. Imagine something. Let's say your friend had replied, "It's so nice to hear from you." You would never have known that if the message stayed on your phone forever.
You're right. Sometimes, the only thing standing between us and a beautiful moment is a story we've invented. There's another thing I've been thinking about. When we were children, did we overthink this much?
I don't think so. Children fall down. They stand up. They say something silly. Everyone laughs. 5 minutes later, they're already playing again. Adults, we're different. We collect moments. Sometimes, we carry them much longer than we need to.
Maybe that's because adults become very good at remembering, but not very good at letting go.
Maybe. Or maybe. We simply forget that nobody is watching us as closely as we are watching ourselves.
I wonder how many people listening right now are carrying a conversation from yesterday, or last week, or even years ago. Something they wish they'd said differently. Something they wish they hadn't said at all. If that's you, I hope today's conversation reminds you of something. Your memory of that moment is probably much heavier than everyone else's.
And if there's one thing I'd like everyone listening to remember, it's this. Your thoughts deserve attention. But they don't deserve blind trust. Sometimes, they're wise. Sometimes, they're simply tired. Learning the difference takes time.
I love that. Your thoughts deserve attention, but they don't deserve blind trust. I'm going to remember that one. Before we say goodbye, I'd like to leave you with one small invitation. Not advice, just an invitation. The next time you catch yourself reading the same message for the 5th time, or replaying the same conversation over and over, pause for just a moment and ask yourself one simple question. Am I looking at what really happened, or the story my mind is creating? Maybe you'll still decide to change the message. Maybe you'll still feel nervous. That's okay. Being thoughtful isn't a weakness. Caring isn't a weakness. Being human isn't a weakness. Just don't let fear write the ending of a story that hasn't happened yet. Thank you for spending this time with us today. If this conversation reminded you of someone, or maybe even reminded you of yourself, then I'm really glad you were here. And before you go, I'd love to ask you one question. What's something you've spent far too much time overthinking? It doesn't have to be something big. Sometimes the smallest stories stay with us the longest. If you'd like to share, we'll be reading the comments. And maybe someone reading your story will realize they're not alone either. Until next time, take care of yourself. Keep listening. Keep speaking. And remember, sometimes the kindest conversation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. I'm Claire. This is Common Ground English. Bye for now.